Bronze Age of guitar playing, there was basically just your hands, and that's all you had to really get your sound. Then amplifiers got bigger, louder, had more gain, fuzz pedals, distortion pedals, overdrive pedals, various effects all came along. And as more of these things became available, the demands for guitar players grew, until eventually some of these companies decided to put a whole bunch of stuff in one box, one single box. And the first two companies, some of the first two companies to do that and really offer it to the mainstream were Boss and Digitech. So we're going to take a couple of these earliest offerings from these companies and put them head to head. So we've got the Boss ME-5 here, which is, I think it's a really cool one, especially in front of a tube amp, because it's got all the classic 80s Boss pedals in it. It's got the CS2, the OD2, the DS1. It's got the equalizer, chorus, flanger, and then it's got a really interesting digital delay and reverb. The delay pretty much sounds just like my DD2. It's really great. Plus, it can control MIDI. This just does a lot of stuff. For something introduced in the 80s, I think this is still an awesome piece of gear, and it sounds great. And then we have this, which is a really interesting one, the Digitech RP-1. It's got a really cool, sleek, stealthy look. It's built like a tank. It's rugged. Stereo in and out, really, really lush effects. It's kind of a unique device in and of itself because it's sort of like a rack. It's almost like an entire rack of effects, preamps and stuff, just all in one board, which is really, really awesome. And it can also control a bunch of stuff with MIDI. So even if you don't like the way it sounds, you got a freaking tank for a MIDI controller that you can use it that way too. So anyway, let's compare some sounds. We're going to start with the RP-1 with a clean sound, and then we're going to try a dirty sound, and then do the same for the Boss. All right, so that was the clean sound from the RP-1, and you could hear a bunch of lush effects. We had some stereo chorusing going on, then some delay and reverb, things of that nature, and a really interesting, unique compressor. So let's check out the distorted sounds now. Whoa, dude, what was that? This has its own thing going on. Really interesting sort of gain structure. But just like the Boss, it's got an analog front end and a digital back end. So a lot of the compression and overdrive, as far as I'm aware, is all rendered in analog form, and then all the effects and shmoo are applied in digital. So let's move on to the Boss ME-5, and we're not going to try to approximate the same tone, but we're going to do something similar. Like we'll have some compression and some modulation and things like that. So let's check it out. So as you can hear, it's kind of a more lively, brighter sounding device. And this was really meant to just be put right in front of a tube amp, like an old Fender or something like that. That's how people were using these. In fact, I believe Rory Gallagher actually used one of these, and a bunch of other people too. Really great device. So the tones you're hearing right now are actually a Vox and a Fender Deluxe modeled in my Helix, and I'm just going stereo out of these units into the input and the auxiliary input of the Helix. And the idea there is kind of like previous videos I've done that were stereo. I'm sort of simulating the most common backline amps, as best as I can for an apartment lifestyle. So let's check out the dirty sounds now. Well, that is quite a bit of filth and raunch. It's a really bold flanger it has here. It's pretty cool. I like the different modes of flange and stuff. And, if you really dial it in, these things just sound magnificent through a good tube amp. That's really what this was designed to do. And all the circuits from those the most classic Japanese-made Boss circuits, they're all in here, which makes it a really good value, I think. These are still pretty inexpensive online. I think you can get them for like 150, 200 bucks, something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these go way up just because of what's inside of them and how cool they are and how well they work. And the fact that you can control MIDI with them, it's great. So anyway, that was my comparison of these two devices. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time for the next video.